The United States is younger than almost every country it trades with. 250 years old, give or take. But the ground underneath it is not young at all. Long before there was a flag, people here were building cities and carving giants into the desert. Most of it is still out there. A quarter-mile snake of earth sitting on top of a meteor crater. A 1,000-year-old town that still refuses electricity and running water on purpose. Desert giants so large nobody noticed them until a plane flew over in 1931. And a lost city on the Mississippi, once bigger than London, with a burial mound holding more than 270 bodies. Most of them young women, most of them sacrificed. That story is #1 on this list, and you are going to want to stay for it. This is the channel where we dig up the places the textbook skipped. If you have not subscribed yet, now is a good time, because we go this deep every single week. Today we are counting down 12 ancient sites in America that still exist today. Number 12. The Blythe intaglios. The giants only the sky can see. 15 miles north of Blythe, California, in the flat gravel desert between the Colorado River and the Big Maria Mountains, 6 enormous figures are carved into the ground. 3 are human. The rest are animals in a long coiling shape that may be a serpent. The largest human figure runs about 170 feet from head to foot. And for centuries, almost nobody knew they were there. That is the strange part. They are too big to see. Stand next to one and you are looking at a faint scattering of rocks and a slightly paler patch of dirt. There is no high ground close enough to take in the whole shape. The local Mojave and Quechan people knew them. The human figures represent Mastamho, the creator of all life. To everyone else, they were invisible. Then, on the 12th of November, 1931, an Army Air Corps pilot named George Palmer flew over the desert and looked down. From a few thousand feet up, the giants snapped into focus. A mountain lion, horses, a serpent, people. They were made by scraping away the dark surface stone to reveal the lighter soil beneath, then lining the edges with the rocks they removed. Nobody is certain how old they are. Estimates run from 450 to 2,000 years. During World War II, General Patton's tanks trained here and drove straight across some of them. Today they sit behind 2 lines of fence, protected as a state landmark open to anyone at any hour. Hardly anyone stops. It took an airplane to see what had been lying in plain sight the entire time. Number 11. Effigy mounds. The bears that walk the bluffs. Across most of ancient North America, people built burial mounds in simple shapes. Cones, domes, long low ridges. But in one narrow stretch of the upper Mississippi, northeast Iowa, southern Wisconsin, a sliver of Minnesota and Illinois, they did something almost no one else did. They shaped the earth into animals. On the forested bluffs above the river near Harpers Ferry, Iowa, more than 200 of these mounds survive. 31 of them are effigies, giant bears and birds built flat into the ground. The largest is the Great Bear Mound, 137 feet long, 70 feet wide at the shoulder, and only about 3.5 feet high. You do not really see it. You walk along it. The builders worked basket by basket. They cleared the ground, outlined the animal, and carried earth to fill the shape over hundreds of trips. The animals may have marked clans or territory or spirits of earth, sky, and water. 20 tribes still consider the place sacred. It became a national monument in 1949. And then it produced one of the stranger crimes in the history of the National Park Service. Here's the detail that stops people cold. Around 1990, the man in charge, the park's own superintendent, stole 41 sets of Native American human remains from the monument's collection and hid the boxes at his house. They stayed there for more than 2 decades before anyone recovered them. The mounds themselves are still open. You can walk 14 miles of trail and stand beside a bear shaped from earth 1,000 years ago, just never on top of it. The people who built these mounds were careful with their dead. The man hired to protect them was not. Number 10. Hovenweep. The towers in the deserted valley. To get here, you drive a long time on unpaved county roads along the Utah-Colorado border. The Park Service has one specific instruction for the final stretch. Do not use your GPS. It will lose you. That is the kind of place this is. The name Hovenweep is a Ute word. It means deserted valley. It fits. Scattered along the rim of a shallow desert canyon stand a cluster of stone towers, square ones, oval ones, round ones, and some shaped like a D. The ancestral Puebloans built them, mostly between 1230 and 1277, around the same time as the cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde nearby. At its peak, the area held as many as 2,500 people. And nobody is certain why the towers are here. That is the real mystery of Hovenweep. The builders put multi-story towers right on the edges of cliffs and on top of freestanding boulders, taking genuine structural risk when there was flat open mesa a few steps away. There are theories: defense, guarding the springs, storage, ceremony, signaling, watching the sky. One tower, Hovenweep Castle, has openings positioned to track the sun and mark the solstices. But no single theory has won. Then within a few decades of finishing them, the people left. The same long drought that emptied Mesa Verde and Chaco emptied this valley too. Today it is a national monument with a visitor center and a rim trail. It draws about 40,000 people a year, a rounding error next to the big parks, and it is a certified dark sky park, one of the darkest spots in the country after sundown. They built something they clearly cared about on the hardest ground available and then walked away from it forever. We are still standing at the bottom of the canyon trying to work out what they were thinking. Number 9. The Newark earthworks. The 2,000-year-old geometry under the golf course. Start with the part that sounds invented. For more than 100 years, one of the most important ancient monuments in North America was a private golf club. Members teed off between earthen walls 2,000 years old. The Newark earthworks in Licking County, Ohio, are the largest set of geometric earthen enclosures in the world. They originally sprawled across more than 4 square miles, perfect circles, squares, and a giant octagon laid out by the Hopewell culture about 2,000 years ago. The octagon joins an 8-sided figure to a circle through a walled avenue, and the whole thing is aligned to the moon. Here's the wild part. The alignment tracks the moon's 18.6-year cycle. Once every 18.6 years, the moon rises directly through the octagon's opening. To know that, the builders had to watch the sky and keep records across generations, far longer than any one person would live. In the 1800s, the people of Licking County actually raised their own taxes to buy the earthworks and protect them. Then, in the early 1900s, the octagon became the Mound Builders Country Club. For over 110 years, golfers played a sacred Hopewell observatory. An Ohio Supreme Court justice later wrote that the site's significance is arguably equal to Stonehenge or Machu Picchu. In 2023, the earthworks became Ohio's first UNESCO World Heritage Site. After a decade-long legal fight, the golf lease was bought out, and on the first day of 2025, the octagon finally fully reopened to the public. The fairways are gone now. The sand traps sit unraked. Cart paths run out into the grass and stop at nothing. For a century, people chased a little white ball across a calendar built to measure the moon, and most of them never knew. Number 8. The Great Serpent Mound. The snake on the crater. More than 300 million years ago, something struck the Earth in what is now Adams County, Ohio. A meteor, most likely. The impact left a crater about 5 miles across and warped the bedrock into a raised plateau. Over the ages, the crater eroded down, but the high ground stayed. Much later, people came and built a snake on it. The Great Serpent Mound is the largest surviving serpent effigy on Earth. It runs 1,348 feet, about a quarter mile, winding through 7 coils, with a curled tail at one end and open jaws at the other, swallowing what looks like a giant egg. It is laid out so the head lines up with the sunset on the summer solstice. And this is where it gets frustrating, in the best way. We do not know for certain who built it or when. The mound holds no burials and no artifacts, so there is nothing inside to date. For years it was credited to the Adena culture, around 300 BCE. Then radiocarbon tests in the 1990s pointed to the much later Fort Ancient people, around 1070. Then dating in 2014, confirmed again in 2019, swung back toward the Adena. The argument is still going. What no one disputes is the setting. Of every ridge in Ohio, the builders chose the one sitting on top of an ancient impact crater. That coincidence has fed everything from serious archaeology to decades of ancient alien speculation. Today, it is a state park with a museum and a tower you can climb to see the full snake from above. From ground level, like a lot of things on this list, it barely reads at all. A quarter-mile serpent built on a wound in the planet by people we still cannot name. Number 7. Watson Break. Older than the pyramids, and you cannot go in. Here's the thing most people get wrong about ancient America. They assume the big stuff came late and came from farmers with kings organizing the work. Watson Break breaks that assumption in half. In the floodplain of the Ouachita River near Monroe, Louisiana, there is an oval of 11 earthen mounds connected by low ridges. The tallest rises about 25 feet, and the whole formation stretches nearly 900 feet across. Through the trees, it does not look like much. It is the oldest earthwork mound complex in North America. Construction began around 3500 BCE. That is roughly 5,400 years ago, older than the Great Pyramid of Giza, older than Stonehenge. And it predates the more famous Poverty Point just up the road by almost 2,000 years. The people who built it were not farmers. They were hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, with no pottery and no agriculture. The idea that mobile foraging people could organize a 500-year construction project rewrote what archaeologists thought was possible. When the dating was published in the journal Science in 1997, based on 27 radiocarbon samples, it pushed the timeline of monumental building in America back by nearly 2,000 years. It was found almost by accident. A local resident noticed the earthworks after a timber crew cleared the land. But there is a catch. You cannot visit. About half the site is still privately owned by several families, and there is no public access. No road in, no trail, no sign. Researchers walk in through private woods. The oldest monument of its kind on the continent, and for almost everyone alive, it might as well be a rumor in the trees. Quick pause. If you are finding this interesting, drop a thumbs up. It genuinely helps these stories reach more people. And tell me in the comments which place has surprised you most so far. The Invisible Desert Giants? The Golf Course Observatory. I read every one. We are exactly halfway, and the second half gets heavier. Abandoned cliff cities, a colonial massacre, and a lost metropolis still to come. Number 6. Poverty Point. 140,000 truckloads of dirt by hand. Start with the workload because the numbers are the story. The builders of Poverty Point moved close to 2 million cubic yards of soil. One researcher put it in modern terms, about 140,000 dump truck loads. They did it with no wheels, no carts, and no draft animals. They carried the earth in baskets. The site sits on a ridge above Bayou Macon in northeastern Louisiana. From the ground, it reads as a series of long, low, grassy ridges, 6 of them in concentric half circles wrapped around a wide plaza with mounds rising beyond. The tallest earthwork stands around 72 feet. The full geometry only makes sense from the air, and the design is unlike anything else on Earth. It went up around 3,400 years ago, while Stonehenge was being finished and Nefertiti ruled Egypt. And like Watson Break before it, Poverty Point was built by hunter-gatherers, not farmers. At its height, as many as 5,000 people may have lived here, at the center of a trade network that ran for hundreds of miles. More than 78 tons of stone and minerals were hauled in from up to 800 miles away, into a region with almost no stone of its own. There are no burials here, no bodies, no tombs. Whatever this place was for, it was not a cemetery. People gathered, traded, and built, and recent research suggests some of these enormous earthworks went up not over centuries but in a matter of months, possibly during huge temporary gatherings of communities who came together, raised earth, and dispersed. It was abandoned around 1100 BCE. The reasons are unclear. What stuns the engineers studying it now is not just that it was built, but that it lasted. More than 3,000 years in a flat, flood-prone, rain-soaked landscape, and the mounds have held their shape with no major collapse. Modern geotechnical teams are still trying to understand how. People with no metal, no wheel, and no written language built something that has outlasted nearly every structure humanity has raised since. Number 5. Taos Pueblo. 1,000 years, no electricity, by choice. There is a building in northern New Mexico where people have lived continuously for roughly 1,000 years. Not a ruin, not a reconstruction. A home lived in, repaired, and handed down since before the Norman conquest of England. Taos Pueblo sits at the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, more than 7,000 feet up. Its two great houses, the North House and the South House, are stacked adobe rising as high as 5 stories, the largest structures of their kind still standing. The walls are earth, straw, and water, maintained the old way, replastered by hand with the same kind of mud the builders used 1,000 years ago. About 150 people live in the old village full time. And here is the part that surprises visitors. Inside the historic core, there is no electricity and no running water. Not because the community cannot have them, because it has chosen not to. The tradition is protected on purpose. Drinking water still comes from Red Willow Creek, which runs through the plaza between the two houses. The Pueblo was a thriving adobe town long before Europeans arrived. When Spanish explorers first saw it glittering in 1540, they reportedly mistook it for a city of gold. The community lived through the missions, through the 1680 Pueblo Revolt, through centuries of pressure, and held on. Members who want modern conveniences live in newer homes on the surrounding land. The old village stays as it was. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1992, and it remains one of the oldest continuously inhabited communities in North America. Most old buildings survive because someone decided to save them. This one survives because the people inside it never left. Number 4. Acoma Pueblo, Sky City. The city in the sky that survived a massacre. In west-central New Mexico, about 60 miles west of Albuquerque, a sandstone mesa rises 357 feet straight out of the desert floor, ringed by stone pinnacles and buttes. On top of it sits a village of adobe. People have lived up there for nearly 1,000 years. The Acoma chose the mesa for 2 reasons. Defense? The cliffs are sheer, and for centuries the only way up was a staircase hand-cut into the rock. And belief, living that high put them closer to the sun, the moon, and their ancestors. The name Acoma means people of the White Rock. It is one of the oldest continuously inhabited places in the country. For a long time, the height kept them safe. Then the Spanish came. In 1598, a colonizing expedition under Juan de Oñate moved into the region. After a confrontation that left several Spanish soldiers dead, including Oñate's own nephew, Oñate ordered retaliation. In January 1599, a force under Vicente de Zaldivar attacked the mesa. The Acoma held them off for 2 days. On the 3rd, the Spanish hauled a small cannon up the back of the mesa and turned it on the village. What followed was a massacre. As many as 800 Acoma people were killed. The survivors were put on trial and brutally sentenced, enslaved, and in many cases mutilated. And the people endured anyway. The village on top of the mesa is still inhabited today. There is one detail that makes that history physical. On the north side of the mesa, a row of houses still carries the burn scars from the fire the Spanish cannon started in 1599. Not in a museum. On the homes. Decades later, a Spanish priest forced the residents to haul tons of adobe, sandstone, and timber up those same narrow cliff trails to build a massive mission church that still stands over the village. You reach the top today only on a guided tour, starting from the cultural center at the base. The community decides what visitors may see and photograph. 1,000 years up there. A massacre. And they are still on the rock. Number 3. Mesa Verde. The city carved into the cliff, then abandoned. For about 600 years, the ancestral Puebloans lived on top of the mesas in southwestern Colorado, farming the high flat ground. Then, in the late 1100s, they did something strange. They moved off the top and built their cities into the sides of the cliffs. Set into natural alcoves in the canyon walls, they raised entire villages of stone, rooms stacked on rooms, round ceremonial chambers called kivas, towers, all of it fitted into the rock under a massive overhang. The largest, Cliff Palace holds about 150 rooms and more than 20 kivas. Mesa Verde as a whole preserves over 600 cliff dwellings among nearly 5,000 known sites. They built and expanded these cliff cities for close to 100 years. They likely moved into the alcoves for defense as competition and a shifting climate closed in on them, and then they left. By 1300, the cliff dwellings stood empty. A prolonged mega-drought is the leading explanation. The farming failed, the water thinned out, and the people migrated south into what is now New Mexico and Arizona, where their descendants live today. They did not vanish, but they abandoned the cliffs completely and never came back. The dwellings sat silent for almost 600 years. In December 1888, two ranchers, Richard Wetherill and Charlie Mason, were chasing stray cattle through a snowstorm along the canyon rim when they looked across and saw it. An entire stone city in the cliff face, frozen and abandoned. Cliff Palace is now one of the most photographed structures on Earth. Mesa Verde became a national park in 1906 and a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1978. You can see many of the dwellings from overlooks and walk into several on ranger-led tours. It is the rare ancient city that did not fall, was not destroyed, and was not buried. The people simply finished with it, climbed down, and walked into the desert. Number 2. Chaco Canyon, the stone calendar in the middle of nowhere. To reach it, you turn off the highway in remote northwestern New Mexico and drive about 20 miles down an unpaved, washboard dirt road. The Park Service keeps the approach rough on purpose. When you arrive, you are roughly 70 miles from the nearest town, in a wide, shallow desert canyon under some of the darkest skies in the United States. And in this hostile, empty place, the ancestral Puebloans built the largest buildings that would exist in what is now the United States for the next 700 years. They are called Great Houses. Chaco has 15 major ones. The largest, Pueblo Bonito, contains somewhere between 700 and 800 rooms and rose 4 and 5 stories high. The builders raised them out of sandstone and timber, and the timber was carried in from forests up to 70 miles away by hand. The buildings are not just big, they are aligned. Pueblo Bonito's main wall runs so precisely north to south that at noon it casts no shadow at all. Its face lines up east to west with the sunrise and sunset of the equinox. On a butte nearby, 3 stone slabs throw a dagger of light across spiral carvings to mark the solstices. The people of Chaco track the sun and the moon, including the moon's 18.6-year cycle, with an accuracy that took generations of patient watching to reach. Inside one room at Pueblo Bonito, archaeologists found more than 50,000 pieces of turquoise. Out from the canyon run wide, engineered roads, straight as rulers, connecting Chaco to a world beyond it. Then, around 1130, a drought settled in for 50 years. Construction stopped. Slowly the people left, drifting toward the Rio Grande and the Hopi Mesas, and by the mid-1200s the canyon was quiet. The great houses still stand, roofless but solid, exactly where they were raised. 1,000 years ago, in a place most people could not survive a week, someone built a machine out of stone for measuring the sky and got it right. Number 1. Cahokia, America's lost megacity. Stand in the grass on a summer afternoon a few miles east of St. Louis, and at first it feels like an ordinary park. Mowed lawns, a few walking paths, cars on the interstate in the distance. Then you look up at the hill in front of you. It is 100 feet high, flat on top, with the St. Louis skyline floating behind it. And it is not a hill. Every ounce of it was carried here and stacked by hand. You climb the stairs, and somewhere near the top, the scale of the place finally lands on you. The grass has been hiding a city. This is Cahokia. 1,000 years ago, this was the largest city in North America, and for a time it was bigger than London. The mound you climbed is Monk's Mound, the largest earthen structure in the Americas north of Mexico. Around it once stood more than 120 mounds. About 80 of them survive. There was a 2-mile wooden stockade, rebuilt again and again. There was a ring of tall timber posts the archaeologists call woodhenge, set to track the sun through the seasons. At its peak, around the year 1100, somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 people lived here. By some estimates, as many as 30,000. It did not grow slowly. Around 1050 it exploded, almost overnight in historical terms, from a village of about 1,000 into a planned metropolis. Some researchers think a single charismatic leader drove it. Some have wondered whether the supernova that lit up the sky in 1054 played a part. And then there is Mound 72. When archaeologists excavated it between 1967 and 1971, they found a burial unlike anything else on the continent. At the center lay an elite figure, laid out on a bed of more than 20,000 shell beads. Around him were the bodies of hundreds of others, retainers and sacrificial victims, buried with him. Many were young women, arranged in neat rows in mass graves. In one feature alone, roughly 53 bodies were laid corner to corner. The pattern suggests groups of young women were sacrificed about once a generation. Chemical analysis of their teeth showed something that genuinely unsettled researchers. These were not foreign captives, they were local. They were Cahokia's own. After about 1200, the city began to come apart under environmental and social strain. By 1400, it was empty. When Europeans arrived centuries later, they could not believe native people had built it and invented other explanations. They were wrong. Today it is a state historic site and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. You can climb Monk's Mound, walk the reconstructed Woodhenge, and stand in the middle of what was once a city of tens of thousands. Most of the people driving past on the interstate have no idea it is there. A metropolis older than the country, with a mound full of sacrificed young women at its heart, sitting quietly under the grass within sight of a modern skyline, and almost no one looks up. 12 places, and not one of them was built by the country that now surrounds it. For me, the one that stays is Cahokia, a city once bigger than London with a sacrificial mound at its heart, sitting under a mowed lawn outside St. Louis. That image does not leave. Which one surprised you most, and which ancient site near you did we miss? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more history hiding in plain sight, subscribe. We go digging like this every week.